All right. Thank you, Kevin. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to everyone online there, too. Very honored to be here this morning in Philadelphia. When Kevin called me a couple months ago and says, hey, can you come speak at a bank security conference? I said, oh, man, I better get a suit so I look like a banker. So usually I'm much more informal when I'm dressed, but bear with me with my disguise today. So Kevin had called me and said, hey, can you come to this event? And I said, yeah, let me check the calendar. And I went and I took a look and I said, oh, that's great, it's open. And the reason it was so exciting for me is that the majority of the trips that I do are international. The majority of our business is outside of the United States. In fact, I spend about 6 months a year outside of the United States. It used to be 9 months, and then my wife threatened to leave me, so now it's down to 6. But just this year alone, I've been to 6 continents just this year, spent some time in Japan earlier this year, was down at the Rio Olympics with Azerbaijan, just came back with the wife from Australia, and so this block this time fit in well with us. In fact, next week I'll head off to Greece, I'll come home, then leave for Estonia, have Thanksgiving with the family, take off to Saudi Arabia for a couple days, come home, then go to Kathmandu, Nepal, which I've been to before, sickest place I've ever gotten, and then come home for the holidays. So when people say, oh, it sounds so exciting that you get to work in 130 countries, and I say, no, not at all. I said, let me tell you what exciting is. And I told some of these guys yesterday that I was talking to, I said, I got up yesterday morning in D.C., I called an Uber. The car came, picked me up, dropped me right at Union Station, and within 5 minutes, I was on the train. 2 minutes later, the train left, and then 90 minutes later, I was here in Philly. I said, that's exciting for me, is the fact that I don't have to go through TSA lines or worry about fluids or shoes or anything like that. So I think the glamour of travel has kind of waned over the years. So today, I'm going to be speaking to you about personal security for your executives, for your branches, how to put a program together, and specifically we'll be talking about identifying kidnap, ransom, and extortion threats. Now, I fully realize that the physical threats towards banks has dropped over the years, the actual physical break-in robberies, and has been replaced by the cyber crimes, the hacking, the social engineering, the skimming, all of that. But nonetheless, because of the active shooter threat and how that's evolved, and there was a great presentation on that yesterday, there still needs to be a personal security plan in place for that. So here's just a quick quote. No person should ever have to wait until they see a gun to know that a threat is present. And this is from Patrick Van Horn, who actually wrote a book, Left of Bang. And if you're familiar maybe with a military term, if you're right of bang, it means after the event has unfolded, so you want to be able to identify a situation left of bang or prior to something going wrong. And this is actually the U.S. Marine Corps, after the first few years in Iraq and Afghanistan, realized that, hey, they need to do something to improve situational awareness. Quick story. About 10 years ago, I was in the West African country of Ivory Coast, or Côte d'Ivoire for you French speakers out there. I was in Ivory Coast. It was about 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was coming back from an official function. I was in the back of a taxi cab, had a couple drinks. It was a nice night. I had the window rolled down because there's no ACs in cabs in Africa, and the smell is not that good, so you want the air flowing. It was late. It was a nice night. I was looking out at the stars and bright skies, and proceeded just to kind of, lull into sleep in the back of the taxi cab. I suddenly find that I'm getting poked in the arm with something, and I wake up from the back of the taxi, and it was an AK-47. It was a gun being jammed into my shoulder. And I realized that we had come to a police checkpoint over on the Charles de Gaulle Bridge over the lagoon there in Ivory Coast, in Abidjan. So I realized, okay, this is a police officer. Well, this could be good or bad in West Africa, being stopped by the police. So he starts yelling in French, which I do not speak. So I say, no, English, parlez-vous anglais, and we begin to try to communicate in English. But basically he tells me to get out of the car, so I get out of the car, my hands are up. I mean, that's the most important thing, is to make sure your hands are exposed to the officer. And essentially he says, oh, well, you are out past our curfew in the country, so you are going to have to pay a ticket, a fine right now. Well, there is no curfew in the country, first of all. So I know immediately that this is just going to be a typical shakedown. Okay, fine, I get it. I mean, it's part of the situational awareness. You need to know these type of things happen. So the next thing that's going through my mind as I'm waking up out of my sleep is I'm starting to say, is this officer, is he high, stoned, drunk? Because over there they chew khat, the root and everything like that, as a narcotic, and they have a tendency to get stoned. So I realize, okay, I'm looking at his eyes while my hands are up. Okay, it doesn't look like his eyes are bloodshot. Okay, he seems to be sober enough that maybe I can reason with him. The next thing I was doing, I was looking down at his AK, which was now slung down over his body, and I was looking to see, is there a magazine even in the AK? Because a lot of times in these African countries, they will not provide military or law enforcement with actual bullets because they're afraid of a coup, so it's always just a show. But sure enough, there was a magazine in there, and then I looked to see if is the safety on or is the safety off? And the safety was off, so it's just, if there was a bullet, it would just be a trigger squeeze away. So I didn't want to do anything stupid to excite this person more than that. So while my hands are still up, I explained to him that I'm a diplomat and I've got diplomatic identification. He's demanding ID. So for any of you who've been to Africa, you know all your shirts in Africa, your pockets are in the front. You always have shirts in the front in Africa for a couple reasons. One, if you keep your pockets down here, the little kids, they come and swarm you in mobs, and then their hands are in their pockets. You don't even feel it, and they take your wallet, your cash, and all that. So all of your cash is always in your front pocket. The other thing is, too, if you start making a dumb reach or move, oh, my ID, yeah, sure, and I reach back here, who knows what this guy could do? He could think I'm reaching for a weapon. So in Africa, hands are up, unbutton the pocket. With this hand, I hand him my diplomatic passport. He still doesn't seem to be grasping the fact that what he's doing is wrong, and he's still demanding that I am not going to leave the checkpoint until I pay him some cash. I get that. So I reach into the other pocket, and I say, how much is the fine? Which he understands and says, well, how much you got? So whatever I had in my shirt pocket, I took it out and I handed it to him. The other thing that I kept in my front shirt pocket as well was a notepad with a little mini pen. And I take it out, and he sees that I'm doing this, so I'm not making any sudden moves. And I say to him, I say, officer, you're doing a great job. You really are. I mean, this is great. You're enforcing the law. In fact, tomorrow, our U.S. ambassador is going to have lunch with your president. And what I would like to do right now is I'm going to be in that meeting, by the way, and I'm going to take your name down and tell the president that you did a fantastic job of enforcing the law, enforcing the curfew in this country, and all of this. I said, what is your name? And he's just kind of looking at me. He said, your name. So he gives me his name, or he gets that, and I write it down. So then he goes and he talks to the taxi driver in the front of the car. And kind of says, hey, what's this American talking about? And so the taxi driver, who speaks pretty good English, explains what's being said. And the next thing you know, the cash is handing back, and he's giving me a siren on his motorcycle escort back to my hotel, goes in, salutes, and everything like that. So situational awareness. So you say, okay, neat story. What's the point of this? How does this relate to domestic bank situational awareness? I will get to that, I promise. Okay. So, talking about domestic bank robberies, these are some statistics from the FBI here. 2014, 3,961 robberies, up a little over 100. In 2015, the 2016 statistics I couldn't find online. I'm sure I would defer to you for whatever your FBI liaison contact is for what those numbers would be this year. Okay. So just a few famous cases. So I try to dig in this to do a little research on what are the actual kidnap, ransom, and extortion threats to the banking industry. And this is sort of what I came up with, and I'm sure a lot of you will maybe have more stories. But the first one of the most famous ones that kept coming up was the Love Connection abduction cases in Tennessee, where they were taking bank executives' families, taking a child, whatever, hostage, and saying, hey, bank executive, I need you to go in, make a big withdrawal if you want all your kids to have all their fingers, things like this. In cases in Connecticut, California, and Tennessee, There were the incidents where the family members that were taken were strapped with explosives. Now, I think in every one of the cases it was not real explosives. I think they were inert, but I still don't think anybody wants anything that looks like an explosive strapped to them. More serious note, Dan Short was a bank president. This was several years ago in Arkansas. Bank manager, he was taken into the bank I don't think it was over the weekend, but they took him into the bank. They made him make a large withdrawal, and then they found his body the next day in a lake in Arkansas. This goes back 20 years, but it brings up a good point. Bank branch manager's family was selling a puppy in the newspaper. A criminal came to the door, used that as a way to gain access to the family, tied up the family, and then had the bank executive go and make withdrawals of large deposits of cash. Now, that was 1995. Long time ago. That's when we were still using newspapers. The internet wasn't even around then. But think of today, Craigslist and all these things where you're selling something, you're inviting someone to your house, your social media postings that, oh, I'll be here, I'm going there, this is where I am right now. My brother-in-law sold a guitar. He's a musician. He sold a guitar off Craigslist, one of these things, and told the guy, hey, $500, come to the house. Guy called him up, came to the house, and the guy handed my brother-in-law a check. And my brother said, hey, sorry, man, cash only. And the guy goes, oh, cash only, and pulled out a gun and says, now you're going to give me the guitar, and then took the guitar from that way. So it would have been very easy for him just to push his way into the house if that's what he had desired to do. And then a more large-scale crime, the Northern Bank in Belfast, two executive family members were taken, held hostage, and that resulted in a crime of $50 million US. Okay, so what do all of these events have in common? There actually is stuff that is in common, but usually it comes after the fact. And that's 90% of all the victims recall later saying, oh my gosh, yes, there was something suspicious that I should have recognized, that I should have paid attention to. Now, this is what's known as the criminal planning cycle. You also see this now, the terrorist planning cycle. The criminal terrorist cycle and the terrorist planning cycle are actually very similar. They both start with target selection. Target selection of a terrorist target or a bank or a particular employee usually starts online surveillance. Again, it starts with the social media. It starts with LinkedIn. I can tell you, as someone who worked in the intelligence community, LinkedIn is a great tool for identifying targets, whether they know it or not. From target selection, it then goes into the planning phase. The planning phase, doing surveillance, casing, probing, doing walk-up attempts, doing general surveillance, and then it goes into logistics and deployment of the actual crime. So the thing that's in common with all of these is there's some kind of surveillance that's being done. So the concept here that we're trying to get across is to be able to put in a security plan that teaches employees what to look for, what is suspicious, what is above or below the normal baseline to be able to determine if this is something that should be reported or something that should be followed. Okay? So what I'm going to talk about this morning are the following topics. I'm going to start off with the Cooper color code, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. I'll go over that very quickly. And then I'll get into behavior observation, baselines and anomalies, the 6 domains of decision making, surveillance recognition, which I think you'll enjoy. I'll give you a lot of tips of how surveillance is actually done from the criminal standpoint against you, so maybe you can recognize what somebody's doing. And then finally, just some tips for protecting yourself, your employees, and your family. Okay, so we'll start with the Cooper color code system. If you're familiar with this, Jeff Cooper, former Marine colonel, invented this. He's the one who put in all the shooting tactics for the Marines and everything. But he basically said that the top 2 inches of your head are the greatest weapon that you have. Your ability to analyze a situation, to make smart decisions, to observe what's going on, that's the greatest friend that you have, whether you're in a hostile situation or just your day-to-day lives. Okay? So here's how that system breaks out. When you're in color code white, you are completely unprepared and unready to take action. That's me in Africa. I'm sitting in the back of the car. I have no idea. Somebody could stick a gun in. Somebody could come and rob me. The taxi driver could just drive to the side of the road somewhere and just mug me, take my money, leave me for dead, anything like that. Pure condition white. That's what I was in. Then you've got yellow. Yellow is where you should be operating every day. You should start your day in yellow. You're prepared, but you're alert, and you're also relaxed as you're going through. I mean, you don't have to be all high-strung throughout your day. It's a good situational awareness. And then there's orange. You're alert to more probable danger. This is that feeling in your stomach. This is that sense. The hair starts standing up. Something is not right here. And then you get into red. Red is your action mode. This is something's going down. You have to make a decision. And this is where we get into the fight or flight response. And again, this could be an active shooter situation. And then black. Black was never in the original Cooper color code. It was only added after. I mean, this was for military personnel here. They should never be in black, where there's a complete breakdown of physical or mental performance. This does happen, though. And I'll give you an example. There were some missionaries in Sri Lanka who were taken by the Tamil Tigers, the guerrilla group out there. Took a group of missionaries, and there was a male in the group who, when he had a gun pointed in his face for the first time, he just locked up. He froze. He couldn't move. He couldn't speak. He could barely walk. He couldn't take directions. While the females, who also had never been in that situation before, handled it much better than he did, and he became such a liability on the group moving through the jungles that the Tigers just said, hey, this guy, they just put a bullet in him. They said, no, this guy's, he can't even move. He's a statue right now. So you never want to find yourself in black. You want to do something, and we'll talk about that something. So the predator mindset. The bad guys are looking at you. They're assessing you. They're assessing your bank. They're assessing your family, your day-to-day lives. What are they looking for? Well, number one, it's the general appearance. Do you look vulnerable? Do you look weak? Do you have vulnerabilities that they can exploit? Are you wealthy? I can't believe I'm saying this right now, but the Kardashian who takes $11 million worth of diamonds to a foreign country and then posts online, I'm here, my kids are here. I mean, is there any wonder that they think bad guys don't monitor these type of situations? Nationality. Again, I've been to 130 countries, and I hate to say this, but Americans are probably some of the most naive travelers around the globe. We really are not good at situational awareness when we travel. We think, you know, hey, oh, this is so nice, we're on vacation, oh, this person talking to me, what a nice, friendly person. No, he's a scammer who's setting you up for something else. Unprepared, vulnerable, again, this is someone who goes out and drinks, who gives into vices, things like that, gambles. It can happen to me. I see this all the time. If you remember, 20, 25 years ago, the kids, remember, used to backpack through Europe. That was the big thing to do. You'd backpack through, and you had their American flag patch on the back of your bag, and you'd talk with the British kids, the Swedish kids, the German kids, and all of that. And you have this mindset, oh, gosh, we're just kids backpacking through Europe. Nothing's going to happen to us. This is great. It's Europe. It's safe. And then the last one, confidence. This is from the predator's mindset. Confidence of no prosecution. So in Brazil, we have my wife's Brazilian, and we have an office down there. We're down there all the time. In Brazil, you have a better than 90% chance of getting away with murder down there. So basically, it's less than 10%. You kill somebody, and you got a better than 90% chance you will get away with it. The police will not catch you. So think about this now. You're robbing a bank. You're robbing someone at an ATM. You're the bad guy. You're the predator. You're saying, all right, so I'm going to rob her as she's at the ATM. Well, if I leave her alive, she can identify me, and then my odds of getting caught are better. So you know what? I'm just going to kill her. So that's the kind of mindset that your enemies could be in. And the criminals read our body language. They read our Cooper color code just as we do. So even if you're, you know, a small person or whatever, you can still carry yourself and not be the target as someone who's big or who's taller, but yet is in a state of white. You know, okay? So basically, your color state determines whether or not you're going to be a target. Okay? Here's just a few examples of condition white. Woman talking on the phone, unprepared to take action. Condition yellow, this is where you should start your days. So you see here, you see this woman here, okay, she's clutching her bag with one hand, seems to be alert, she has another hand free if anything comes up. And then you got the millennial here. What are they? Kids face down in the phone, just going through life looking like that. Anybody could come and rob them. And again, I said that we do a lot in Brazil. In Brazil, if ever you see a woman walking on the street in Brazil, and some of you ladies may do this already, they will always walk against traffic on a sidewalk. So in other words, nobody can come up on a road behind them from a van or something like that, pull them into a van. The bag is always slung across their body with the purse side facing a building, never facing a street. Nobody in Brazil carries a cell phone like this. It's always through the headphones, and the headphones are always run through the bottom of the shirt and comes out this way because somebody could come by on a motorcycle, a motorbike, and just yank them right off. And iPhones, there's no Apple in Brazil because of the socialist rules down there. They don't allow it. So it's a high. If you think iPhones and Samsungs are expensive here, try going into some of these countries with protective economies that don't allow that. It really becomes a target. And when we took people down, Olympic sponsors down for the Rio Games, and that was the hardest thing that we had to do, was to educate these people. Don't be using the ATM machines. White-collar crimes, skimmers are on every single ATM. Don't walk around with your iPhones. Leave the jewelry at home. All of these things. Condition orange. Condition orange, this is something's not right. Something is out of the baseline of the norm, so you're a little bit on edge, you're alert, you know what's going on. And then red. Red is, again, like I said, the fight or flight. Now, I'm a natural-born coward. I prefer to run than engage with any kind of physical confrontation or situation. But the point is, when you're in condition red, do something. Do something, even if it does mean running, screaming, kicking, whatever. Do something. They say in most kidnapping situations, your best chance of escape is right at the point when somebody grabs you. The bad guy is hoping, sometimes expecting, that you're just going to give in and get into that van or whatever it is. They're just going to allow themselves to push in the house. That's what they're expecting. If you fight back, you scream, you do anything, you surprise them. And now you change the tables, even if it's slightly, you're doing something. And again, black is just pure panic. It's just, you can't do anything. And again, who's to say, depending on the situation, what you would do? I mean, you always think that you would do something. You always try to prepare, you always train for the worst, but you never really know what you're going to do until you're put in that situation. Okay, so let's talk now a little bit about how you improve your observational skills here. So we're basically going to talk about identifying your threats based on the cues from things that you see in your everyday lives. So you can use 4 specific skills for this. The first one is your situational awareness. The next is the sensitivity to baselines and anomalies, which is very prevalent and something that you can build into your bank programs. Your critical thinking, and then your decision making, and I'll go over these. So the first one, behavioral or situational awareness. Knowing the environment and the people around you. I mentioned that my wife is Brazilian. My wife was actually a police officer in Brazil. She comes from a police family. Then she went to work. She actually worked for ESPN. She was the head of security for international security for ESPN. So she's very savvy. She's much more savvy even than I am. In fact, she yells at me. She says, hey, when you're in the United States, you are condition white and yellow. She says, yeah, when you're overseas, you're a different guy. But when you're in the U.S., you're just too comfortable in the U.S., and you don't pay attention to things that are going on around you. And that's probably true. I spend so much time in war zones and hotspots that when I come to the U.S., I'm like, I'm in the Marriott in Philadelphia. What could happen to me here? You know, and you don't think about that. Where she, on the other hand, is always alert. And a perfect example, we were in São Paulo, Brazil, and we were coming from a dinner. And if you ever spend time in Latin America, you know that a dinner in Latin America doesn't start till about 11 p.m. And usually goes into and this is like on a Monday or Tuesday night, you know, and then you're expected to be at work at 8 a.m. But it was 4 a.m., and we were coming back from a restaurant. My wife was driving, because I do not drive in São Paulo. I've driven in Afghanistan, I've driven in Iraq, I will not drive in São Paulo. It's that dangerous. So she's driving, and I'm in the passenger seat. And again, I'm in my condition white phase. You must think this is all I do. I'm sleeping in the right-hand passenger seat. And suddenly, my wife turns the wheel hard, jumps over the median into oncoming traffic, pulls the wheel back, and then continues to drive straight as nothing happened, and then just starts changing some songs on the radio. I wake up, what are you doing? What's going on? What's going on? And she says, oh, don't worry about it. Just a couple guys came up on a motorcycle next to our window. and the guy in the back pulled a gun, and as soon as he pulled the gun, I just ran him off the road into oncoming traffic. I said, is he dead? I don't know. And she just kept going. And I said, well, how did you know that this was coming? And she says, everybody in Brazil knows. When you see two people on a motorcycle, the first guy is the driver, the back guy is the guy who points the gun and makes the robbery. Dummy, what do you mean, you know? So, okay, you know. But again, situational awareness. Driving down the road, saw two guys on a motorcycle coming up on her one side. She was prepared. She went from condition orange, she made a decision, went to condition red, and then she suddenly went to yellow and started playing with the radio. So it just comes with the culture and the environment. Okay, your critical thinking. No two situations are ever alike. You can practice, you can study case studies, all of these kind of things. It's kind of like that old saying that Dwight Eisenhower said. He said, you know, plans are useless. The first time you hear a gunshot, your plan goes out the window. But your planning is indispensable. So even though you rehearse, you plan, you do tabletop exercises, chances are the exact same scenario you rehearsed for is not going to happen. But at least you've planned and you'll be able to improvise on the fly with a lot more comfort. And the most important thing to see on this slide here is this one here. Is in the critical thinking phase, it's the idea of getting off the X. Now, this is a term that really originated with Iraq and Afghanistan. And the whole idea is, they say, listen, we're going to give you all this great training, but I want you to remember, if you are ever in a point where you're driving down the road and your convoy hits an IED, or suddenly your helicopter crashes, or somebody shoots out your tires, remember one thing, if nothing else, get off the X, which basically means move. Because if you sit there and do nothing, you are now a magnet for trouble. Bullet magnet, whatever it is. If you move, even if you get the tires shot out of your car, you hit an IED and your car can still run, continue to drive that car. Because you are being the bad guy puts you in what's known as a kill box. You're driving across the road, boom, they hit it, cars are disabled, and all the firefights start. But if you start moving, you suddenly disrupted their plans. The more that you move from the X, the greater your chances of survival and success. Right? So always think, teacher employees, if something goes down, do something, move, get off the X. And again, we talked about the freeze, flight, or fight. Again, you don't have to teach anybody in your office to suddenly do martial arts. I'm not saying anything like that. Just have a plan. Even if that plan includes something else on here, barricading themselves into a room. Baselines and anomalies. Okay, establishing norms from other behaviors. So again, this is taking a snapshot of a situation, looking at it, analyzing it, and deciding if everything is okay or if something's slightly off. And there's a great movie that is actually shown in like Intel training courses. Do you remember the movie with Robert Redford and Brad Pitt? It was called Spy Game. And it came out, I think, in like 2000 or 2001. It was like a pre-9/11 movie. But there's a great scene when Robert Redford is this old CIA case officer, station chief, and he's teaching a young Brad Pitt about how to understand his situational awareness. And they're in West Germany during the 80s, as the movie said. And Robert Redford tells the young kid, they're sitting at a restaurant, and he goes, every room that you walk into should be a snapshot. You should be looking at it, you should be assessing it, and dismissing most of it without even thinking about it. It should become as natural as breathing for you. And that's what we're talking about when we're setting a baseline of what the room is, and then what anomalies enter into that picture. So again, you've got the baseline is something breaking that base. So for example, excuse me, take a look at this picture here. What do you see? What's the baseline? If you saw this every day outside of your window, what is the baseline that you're looking at here? Everybody's looking straight ahead. What else? Everybody's moving in one direction, right? The shopping is on the sides. The middle is left over just for one-way movement. So what would be an anomaly of that? Suddenly somebody stops in the middle, somebody turns in the middle, somebody drops down to tie a shoe in the middle. That's what we mean by an anomaly within a baseline. Same thing here. Okay, you're looking at this picture. Okay, you've got the train station. Most of the people, your baseline is, hey, it looks like they're carrying hand luggage or very, very simple light luggage with them. Everybody seems to be moving. Nobody seems really to be to be settled down. What if you saw a bag just laying there? That's your anomaly. You see somebody sitting on the floor. That's an anomaly. That should raise you to the next color level. Okay? Another example here, I love the Bourne movies. I think they're really great, but I thought this was funny. If you go to some of these Middle Eastern countries, you have to be culturally aware of the baseline as well. So if you go to the Middle East, everybody is doing that to you. I mean, there is this intrusion of space, personal privacy. When you're over there, people will, I mean, they'll flat out stare you up and down all day long. And if you say, excuse me, that's rude, you're staring at me, they'll just continue to stare at you all day long. So you have to understand it within cultural context as well. Here's another one. Everybody's moving through the queues and suddenly somebody underneath. So if you put this in terms of your bank and training your people, you say, okay,